My husband's voice cut through the charity gala like a blade. 18 years playing secretary in army offices. Meanwhile, some of us built real careers. The CIA director's wine glass stopped halfway to his lips. His eyes found mine across the ballroom, and I watched recognition dawn like a slow-motion explosion. Let me back up. The invitation came on embossed cardstock. Senator Richardson's annual Defense and Intelligence Gala. My husband Derek had circled the date 3 times, drawn arrows, added exclamation points. This was his night. His consulting firm had just landed a contract advising the Defense Department on logistics software. He'd been insufferable for weeks. "You'll need to look the part," he'd said, eyeing my closet with distaste. "These are important people. Senators. Military brass. Try not to mention your little army stint. It's not the same caliber." My little army stint had been 18 years. I'd separated 2 years ago at 40, taken a job with a defense contractor doing administrative work, and tried to build something that looked like a normal life. Tried to be the wife Derek had decided he wanted when we met at a conference, and I'd been vague about my background. The dress I wore tonight was burgundy, conservative, expensive because Derek insisted. My hair was styled soft, makeup carefully applied to look natural. I'd learned to walk without favoring my right leg, where the pins still ached in cold weather. I knew, like every other corporate spouse in the room. Perfect. The ballroom glittered with crystal and ambition. Defense contractors mingled with uniformed officers, congressional staffers clustered near the bar, and Derek worked the room like a man running for office. I stayed at his elbow, smiled when appropriate, and shook hands with people whose names appeared on classified briefings I'd once memorized. Derek Morrison, my husband announced to a group near the seafood display, Morrison Defense Solutions. "We are revolutionizing military logistics through AI integration." He gestured vaguely at me. "My wife, Rachel. She used to work for the Army, admin stuff, so she understands the basics." A Marine colonel in dress blues raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. "These old systems are dinosaurs," Derek continued, warming to his subject. His hand found the small of my back, possessive. "The military's problem is they promote based on time served, not innovation. You get career soldiers who've never had a real job, making decisions about technology they don't understand." "Interesting perspective," the colonel said dryly. I excused myself before Derek could elaborate. The bathroom was empty and blessedly quiet. I ran cold water over my wrists, counted to 10, reminded myself why I'd agreed to come. Because Derek had asked. Because marriage meant compromise. Because I'd classified so much of my life that silence had become a habit. When I returned, Derek had found a new audience, Senator Richardson herself, along with several congressional aides and a man in an immaculate suit whose bearing screamed intelligence community. "The problem with military intelligence," Derek was saying, "is it's neither military nor intelligent." He laughed at his own joke. A few people smiled politely. "Is that right?" the man in the suit said. His voice was quiet, measured. "Look at recruitment. 18 years, and my wife maxed out as a captain. Did paperwork, wrote reports. Never deployed anywhere dangerous. Meanwhile, I built a company from scratch, employ 60 people, impact actual defense policy." Derek's arms snaked around my waist. "She means well, but there's real contribution and there's just putting in time." The Marine colonel from earlier had materialized at the edge of the group. He was staring at me with an intensity that made my spine straighten instinctively. "What was your MLS, ma'am?" he asked quietly. 35L, I said, then caught myself. "Counterintelligence agent." Derek waved dismissively. "Which sounds impressive, but meant investigating stolen equipment, background checks. That sort of thing. Nothing classified. Nothing sexy." The man in the suit tilted his head. 35L, Fort Huachuca. "Initially," I said carefully. "And after your initial training?" I could feel the weight of the room shifting. The colonel was watching me like I was a puzzle. Senator Richardson had gone very still. "Various assignments," I said. "The usual progression." "Rachel's being modest," Derek interrupted. "She doesn't like to admit her career wasn't exactly special forces." "It's fine, honey. Not everyone can be an operator. Someone has to keep the files organized." The man in the suit extended his hand to me, bypassing Derek entirely. "I don't believe we've been introduced. William Ashford." I shook his hand. His grip was professional, firm, and he held my eyes a beat too long. Director Ashford runs the CIA, Senator Richardson said, watching this exchange with sudden interest. Derek's posture changed, straightening. Sir, I apologize, I didn't realize. Derek Morrison, Morrison Defense Solutions. Perhaps we could discuss. Mrs. Morrison, Ashford said, still looking at me. Your husband mentioned you were a captain. Active duty or reserve when you separated? Active. 18 years. That's an unusual stopping point. His eyes were sharp, analytical. Just shy of retirement eligibility. Medical separation. I nodded fractionally. Where were you stationed before separation? The room had gone quiet. I could feel Derek's confusion, his growing unease at being sidelined. I'm not at liberty to discuss specific assignments, sir, I said. Ashford smiled slightly. Of course not. He pulled out his phone, tapped it, studied the screen. His expression changed, surprise, then something like vindication. Senator Richardson, Colonel Martinez, could I borrow you both for a moment? There's something I think you should see. They stepped aside, heads bent over Ashford's phone. I watched the colonel's face drain of color. The senator's hand went to her mouth. Derek leaned close. What's going on? I don't know, I said, but my heart was pounding. Ashford returned the phone to his pocket and turned to face the small crowd that had gathered. His voice carried now, pitched to command attention. I want to correct something that was said earlier, he began. About military intelligence. About what constitutes real contribution. His eyes found mine. Mrs. Morrison, do you know why I recognized your MWES progression? Sir, because I spent 20 years in the intelligence community before taking this position. And in that time, there were certain names that came up in classified briefings. Certain operators whose work was so sensitive, so critical, that even their successes had to remain buried. He paused. I'm going to ask you a direct question, and you're under no obligation to answer. But given what your husband has said tonight, I think you might want to consider it. I kept my breathing steady, controlled. Was your call sign Revenant? The room seemed to tilt. Derek's hand tightened on my waist. Call sign. Rachel, what is he talking about? I said nothing. Couldn't, wouldn't, shouldn't. 18 years of operational security training didn't dissolve just because someone said a name out loud. But Colonel Martinez was staring at me like I'd materialized from smoke. Revenant, he whispered. The Revenant. Holy God. Someone want to explain what's happening? Derek's voice had climbed half an octave. Ashford kept his eyes on me. Mrs. Morrison, I apologize for doing this publicly. If you want me to stop, say the word. But I think, he glanced at Derek with something close to contempt. I think it's time some truths came to light. Senator Richardson touched my arm gently. Rachel, is it true? I looked at each of them. The colonel, the senator, the director of the CIA. Then at Derek, whose face showed confusion morphing into alarm. The other guests had formed a loose circle, sensing drama. Yes, ma'am, I said quietly. That was my call sign. I don't understand, Derek said. You worked counterintelligence, background checks, and your wife, Ashford interrupted, worked for the Army's Counterintelligence Special Operations Division. Not the conventional CI you're thinking of. The Tier 1 unit that embeds with special mission units and conducts operations in denied areas. He addressed the room now. How many people here have heard of the intelligence support activity? Gray Fox. Task Force Orange. Several hands went up, mostly the military officers. Derek's wasn't among them. Those are the intelligence units that support Delta Force and SEAL Team 6. They find the targets. They gather actionable intelligence in real time during operations. Ashford's voice hardened. Mrs. Morrison's unit did that for the entire special operations community. She wasn't investigating stolen Humvees. She was hunting terrorists, infiltrating networks, and running operations that will be classified for the next 50 years. The colonel spoke up, his voice reverent. I heard stories about Revenant. I did 3 tours in Afghanistan with special forces. We'd get intelligence packages, target locations, pattern of life analysis, network maps that were so precise, so detailed, that we knew someone had been on the ground, in the dirt, doing work we couldn't imagine. He looked at me. They said Revenant was a ghost. Moved through denied areas, made contacts no one else could make, and got out clean every time. Rachel. Derek's voice was small now. The name came from your survival rate. Ashford continued. You were compromised twice. Once in Yemen, once in Syria. Both times, according to the after-action reports I read, you should have died. You came back anyway. Revenant. One who returns from the dead. My right leg throbbed with the memory of Syria. The explosion, the heat, the sensation of my femur shattering. 3 months at Walter Reed. Derek visiting twice, both times asking when I'd be done with army stuff so we could focus on our life together. That's impossible, Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. She was stationed at Fort Meade. She came home most nights. She never deployed for more than a few months. Fort Meade is where the NSA is headquartered, Senator Richardson said gently. It's also home to several intelligence units whose existence is barely acknowledged. And those few months' deployments. She looked at me with new understanding. I'm guessing they weren't the whole story. I told you I couldn't discuss my work, I said to Derek. You assumed that meant it wasn't important. Ashford pulled out his phone again. Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to show you something. If you want me to stop, say so. He tapped, swiped, then turned the screen toward me. It was a commendation letter. Classified at the time it was written, recently declassified based on the marking. My name was in the header, along with ranks and dates. The citation described an operation in Syria, the one where I'd been injured, where I'd maintained cover inside a terrorist cell for 6 weeks, feeding intelligence that led to the capture of 3 high-value targets and the prevention of an attack on a U.S. embassy. There are 12 more like this in your file, Ashford said. This is the only one declassified enough for me to show without violating current statutes. Derek took the phone with shaking hands. He read it once, twice, then looked up at me like I was a stranger. You told me you did administrative work. I told you I couldn't discuss my work, I corrected. You decided what that meant. But you let me think. I let you think what you wanted to think because telling you the truth would have violated federal law. My voice stayed level, but something was building in my chest. 18 years of silence, of being misunderstood, of watching Derek dismiss my service while inflating his own importance. Every time you made a joke about my little army stint, I stayed quiet. When you told your clients that your wife played secretary while you built a real career, I smiled and nodded. Because I took an oath, Derek. And that oath mattered more than your ego. The room was silent. Colonel Martinez stepped forward. Ma'am, for what it's worth, I worked with the intelligence products your unit generated. We called them Revenant packages. They were gold standard, actionable, accurate, detailed. My team executed a hostage rescue in Baghdad based on one of your reports. We got the hostages out. Everyone came home. His voice roughened. You saved my men's lives, and I never knew who to thank. Just doing my job, sir, I said automatically. She briefed the National Security Council, Ashford added. At least 4 times that I'm aware of. The president specifically requested her assessments on 3 separate operations. But sure, Mr. Morrison, tell us again about real contribution. Derek's face had gone from pale to flushed. You should have told me. I couldn't. You should have made me understand. How? The word came out sharper than I intended. How should I have made you understand without violating classification? Should I have shown you my scars and let you guess? Should I have name-dropped the operations I ran so you'd respect me more? I took a breath, steadied myself. I tried to tell you it was important work. You laughed. I tried to explain that I couldn't discuss details. You said that meant there were no details worth discussing. Senator Richardson's eyes were shrewd, assessing. Mr. Morrison, you mentioned building a company that impacts defense policy. Have you ever had a security clearance? No, but your wife held a TS/SCI clearance with special access programs attached. That's the highest level available. She was read into operations that most general officers will never hear about. The senator's voice was kind but firm. I think perhaps you've been measuring contribution by the wrong metrics. Ashford pocketed his phone. Mrs. Morrison, there's something else. I reached out to a colleague while we were talking. He's outside. If you're willing, he'd like to say hello. Who? I asked. He said you'd know him by his call sign. Mako. My breath caught. Mako. Navy SEAL, Team 6, operated with my unit for 2 years in Afghanistan and Yemen. We'd run a dozen missions together. He'd pulled me out of the ambush in Yemen, carried me 3 miles to the extraction point with a bullet in his own shoulder. He's here. He's at the Pentagon now. Senior officer. When I told him Revenant was at this gala, he drove straight over. Derek was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Navy SEALs. The ballroom doors opened. A man in navy dress blues walked in, his stride confident and purposeful. He was older than I remembered, gray threading through his hair, but his eyes were the same, sharp, intelligent, kind. His chest was covered in ribbons, including the Navy Cross. He saw me and stopped. Smiled. Been a long time, Revenant. Too long, Mako, I said, and my voice broke just slightly. Commander James Mako Torres crossed the ballroom like he owned it, which in a way he did, decorated combat veteran, respect radiating from him like heat. But when he reached me, he didn't salute or posture. He just pulled me into a careful hug. Heard you got out, he said quietly. Heard it was rough. Heard you made commander. Heard you earned it. He stepped back, keeping one hand on my shoulder. His eyes moved to Derek, assessed him in about 2 seconds, and dismissed him. Director Ashford said someone was talking trash about your service. Want me to correct the record? Where you got this? Despite everything, I smiled. I think the director handled it. Good man. Mako turned to address the room, his voice carrying the easy authority of someone used to leading dangerous men in impossible situations. Since we're apparently airing classified laundry tonight, within reason, let me add something. I ran with Revenant for 2 years. Mostly Afghanistan, some Yemen, one op in Syria that I still can't fully discuss. She saved my life at least 3 times that I can count. Commander, I started, but he waved me off. The thing about special operations is everyone focuses on the shooters, the door kickers, the guys with beards and blacked-out rifles. He looked at Derek deliberately. But we don't get to kick doors without intelligence. Without someone on the ground, in the dark, often alone, gathering the information we need. Revenant did that. She infiltrated networks we couldn't touch, made sources we couldn't recruit, provided intelligence that turned impossible missions into successful ones. Colonel Martinez nodded. The Revenant packages. Gold standard, Mako confirmed. We trusted her reports more than we trusted our own eyes sometimes. Because she was that good. That thorough. He looked back at me. The Yemen op, the ambush, you got compromised because you stayed in place to confirm a target's location. You could have extracted 12 hours earlier. But you stayed, got us the confirmation, and then nearly died for it. Derek's voice was barely a whisper. Rachel, why didn't you tell me any of this? Because I signed papers that said I'd go to federal prison if I discussed my work with anyone not cleared for it. I said. Because the people I worked with trusted me to stay quiet. Because operational security isn't something you break just to win an argument at a dinner party. But I'm your husband. Yes, you are. I looked at him fully now, the man I'd married 3 years ago, thinking I could build a normal life. The man who'd proposed after 6 months of dating and never asked hard questions about my past. The man who loved the idea of having a wife but never bothered to know who she actually was. And you spent 3 years dismissing my service, minimizing my career, and making jokes about my little army stint to anyone who'd listen. You never once considered that maybe I was quiet because the work mattered, not because it didn't. Senator Richardson stepped closer. Mrs. Morrison, Rachel, if I may, I sit on the Senate Intelligence Committee. I've seen reports from your unit. I didn't know the names attached, but I knew the caliber of work. She glanced at Derek. Your wife's intelligence contributions directly impacted national security. Lives were saved. Terrorist attacks were prevented. That's not hyperbole. That's documented fact. The Syria op, Ashford added, where you were injured. The after-action report said you maintained your cover while wounded, continued transmitting intelligence while waiting for extraction, and identified 2 additional targets during exfil. You were recommended for the Defense Superior Service Medal. It's in your file, still classified. Derek was shaking his head slowly. I don't know how to process this. Here's how you process it, Mako said, his voice hardening. Your wife is a goddamn American hero. She bled for this country, nearly died for it, sacrificed years of her life operating in places that would give you nightmares. And you repaid her by treating her service like a joke. He stepped closer to Derek. I've got operators, good men, brave men, who have Revenant's intelligence work tattooed on their arms because it saved their lives. So when you stand here and talk about real contribution, understand that you're not qualified to shine her boots. Commander, I said quietly. It's okay. It's not okay, Mako said. But it's your call. The room was watching. Military officers who understood what had been said. Contractors and staffers who were piecing it together. Senator Richardson, whose expression held something like vindication. She'd spent years fighting for recognition of intelligence operators, arguing they deserved the same respect as combat arms. Derek's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went white. "It's Harris, from the Defense Logistics Agency." His voice was hollow. "He's canceling our meeting next week. Says there's been new information about company leadership that requires review." "Word travels fast in this community," Ashford said mildly. "Perhaps someone mentioned that Morrison Defense Solutions CEO spent the evening publicly demeaning his wife's classified service. People tend to remember that sort of thing." "You're blackballing me?" "I'm doing nothing. But other people who value service and sacrifice, might have questions about your judgment." Ashford's smile was thin. "Consider it a learning opportunity." Derek looked at me, something desperate in his eyes. "Rachel, you have to fix this. Tell them I didn't know. Tell them." "I'll tell them the truth," I said. "That you never asked. That you made assumptions. That you valued appearances over substance. I took off my wedding ring, held it between us. And that I'm done pretending to be less than I am to make you comfortable. You're leaving me? Over this. Over 3 years of this. Over being diminished and dismissed and treated like my service was a hobby I outgrew." I placed the ring in his palm. "I spent 18 years being someone extraordinary. I'm not spending the rest of my life being told I'm ordinary." Senator Richardson touched my arm. "Rachel, if you're looking for work, my office could use someone with your skill set. Intelligence liaison. Cleared position. Government salary, but the work matters. I might take you up on that, ma'am." Mako grinned. "Or if you want to get back in the game, I know some contractors doing interesting work. Proper vetting, proper respect. They'd kill to have someone with her background. I'll think about it." Derek was still standing there, ring in hand, looking lost. Part of me, the part that had tried to make this marriage work, felt sorry for him. But the larger part, the part that had survived ambushes and explosions and years of classified hell, was simply done. "I'll have my things out by the weekend," I told him. "You can keep the house. I'll keep my pride." Ashford extended his hand. "Mrs. Morrison, or should I say Captain Morrison, it's been an honor. If you need a reference for whatever comes next, you have my direct line." "Thank you, sir." The party continued, but I was done with it. Mako walked me to the coat check, then out to the parking lot. The April air was cool and clean. "You okay?" he asked. "Getting there. For what it's worth, you deserve better. You always did." He squeezed my shoulder. "Stay in touch, Revenant. The community takes care of its own." I drove home, to Derek's house, which had never really been mine, and started packing. 18 years of service, reduced to a few boxes of photos and medals, and a DD 214 that would never tell the whole story. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself. My phone rang at midnight. Unknown number. "This is Rachel." "Captain Morrison, this is General Patricia Thornton, JSOC. Director Ashford gave me your number. I have a situation that requires your particular expertise. Contractors only, plausible deniability, 6-month deployment. Interested?" I looked at the half-packed boxes, the wedding photos face down on the dresser, the life I tried to build from silence and compromise. "General, I'm very interested." "Good. Report to Fort Bragg Monday, 0800. Use your old call sign for access. Welcome back, Revenant." I hung up and smiled. The ghost had one more mission. Maybe several. And this time, I wouldn't apologize for being exactly who I was. End.